chaos of trained men doing their job at 3 a.m. Lucia appeared at the top of the main staircase, a dark robe wrapped tight around her, feet in sensible slippers. She looked like every housekeeper in every expensive home Sophia had ever seen, except her eyes went straight to the blood on Anthony's arm and the dust and feathers in Sophia's hair. "Dear God," Lucia breathed. "Is she alive?" Anthony cut in. "We're going downstairs. Safe room." Lucia stepped aside, but not before draping a thick throw blanket she carried over Sophia's shoulders. "I'll bring coffee and supplies." The hallway outside Anthony's office looked exactly as it had the first time Sophia had walked down it. Polished wood, tasteful art, expensive rug. It felt different now, the air buzzing with urgency. Anthony set her down in the office just long enough to free his hand to open the hidden door. Sophia watched, dazed, as a section of bookshelf clicked and swung inward, revealing a steel door that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. He entered a code, pressed his thumb to a small panel, and the locking mechanism disengaged with a heavy final sound. The safe room was cooler than the rest of the house. Concrete floor, reinforced walls, no windows. A row of monitors displayed camera feeds from around the property. Front gate, back lawn, perimeter fence, interior hallways. A couch sat against one wall, a small kitchenette against another, and a bathroom door was partially visible in the corner. It wasn't cozy, but it was functional. Anthony carried her to the couch and set her down gently, like she might break. As soon as she was seated, her body started shaking in earnest. The adrenaline had nowhere left to go. "I'm okay," she lied, wrapping the blanket tighter. "No, you're not." Anthony dropped to a crouch in front of her. Up close, she could see now how bad his arm really was. A long, jagged gash along his forearm, skin split and raw, tiny glittering shards of glass still embedded in it. Blood had run down to his wrist and dripped off his fingers. "You're bleeding," she said, voice hoarse. "It looks worse than it is." He glanced at the monitors, then back to her. "How do you feel? Dizzy? Nauseous? Any pain besides your shoulder?" "My feet," she croaked, only now noticing the sting. "I stepped on..." There was glass. His eyes flicked down, and his jaw hardened. "Lucia!" She must have been closer than Sophia realized, because the vault door opened almost immediately. Lucia came in with a first aid kit and 2 steaming mugs on a tray. "Oh, child," she whispered when she saw Sophia properly. "Here." She set the tray down and moved straight to her, efficient hands tucking the blanket around Sophia's legs and shoulders more securely. "Drink. Sugar will help." Sophia wrapped shaking hands around the mug. The heat seeped into her skin, grounding her slightly. The coffee smelled strong and bitter, cut with too much sugar and cream. Exactly the way she usually took it. "Let me see your feet," Lucia said gently. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Lucia slid the blanket gently aside, left Sophia's tank top and shorts alone, and lifted one foot carefully. Tiny red dots of blood marred the pale skin of her soles. Nothing major, but more than she'd registered at the time. Lucia cleaned them with practiced care, removing a few small slivers of glass and pressing bandages over the worst spots. On the other side of the room, Daniel spoke into a radio, his eyes never leaving the wall of monitors. "East perimeter secure. Team 3 sweeping the tree line. Team 4 checking vehicle tracks at the north access road. No additional movement so far." Anthony watched the feeds like a hawk. Only when Lucia finished with Sophia's feet did he let her come near his arm. "Sit," she ordered him, patting the cushion beside Sophia. He ignored the order to sit, and instead perched one hip on the edge of the coffee table, arm extended over his knee so Lucia could access the wound. Sophia watched as Lucia cleaned away the blood, pulling out embedded glass with tweezers. Anthony barely flinched, jaw tight, but otherwise stoic. Sophia forced herself to look at the damage. The cut was deep enough to need stitches if they were anywhere else. But here, in this world, she had a feeling good enough would be the standard. Lucia disinfected it with ruthless efficiency, wrapped it in sterile gauze, and taped it off. "There," Lucia said. "That will hold for now. You need a proper doctor later, but at least it's clean." "Thank you," Anthony said. But his eyes were already back on Sophia, tracking every micro-expression. Lucia poured more coffee, set it within reach, then lightly squeezed Sophia's shoulder. "You're safe in here. The walls are reinforced steel. No one can get through without Mr. Rinaldi's code." Safe. The word felt strange and heavy. Anthony moved back to the couch, this time sitting right beside Sophia, not touching, but close enough that their knees brushed when she shifted. He picked up his own mug, but didn't drink. His bandaged hand shook once, barely visible, before he pressed it against his thigh to still it. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "What's going on in your head?" "Bullets," she said before she could filter it. "I keep seeing that hole above my bed. It's right where my head was when I went to sleep." His jaw tightened. "I know. If you hadn't been in the hall..." Her voice broke, breath catching. "How did you even get there in time?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd been expecting that question. "I couldn't sleep. Security sent me an updated report before midnight. Something in it bothered me. Nothing concrete, just... my instincts wouldn't shut up." Sophia forced herself to focus on him. "So you were awake?" "Yes." He looked briefly at the monitors, then back at her. "I walked the east wing, checked the doors, the windows, the camera feeds. Your door. I didn't like that your room has an external exposure. You already said that before I moved in," she whispered. "That it wasn't as safe. And I moved you there anyway because I thought the security grid was enough." His gaze darkened. "That was my mistake. You didn't pull the trigger." "No." His voice turned flint hard. "But I put you in that room." Sophia took another sip of coffee. The trembling in her hands had lessened, but it was still there, just beneath the surface. Her shoulder throbbed in time with her pulse. Her feet stung dully under the bandages. "I don't understand how they got that close," she said. "Isn't this place impossible to get into?" "It's very difficult," Anthony corrected. "Not impossible. Especially if someone on the outside has help from someone on the inside." Sophia's stomach dropped. "You mean one of your people?" "Maybe. Or someone bribed a contractor months ago when we did renovations. Or someone got hold of old blueprints." He rubbed his jaw with his uninjured hand. "Daniel is finding out which one." "But they knew enough to avoid certain cameras and hit a blind angle. And they knew which window was mine." "Yes, because they've been watching. Because they've been watching," he confirmed quietly. She studied his face. Beneath the iron control, the anger, the cold focus, there was something else. Something raw. Fear. Not generalized fear. Targeted, specific fear for her. "You were more scared for me than for yourself," she realized aloud. His eyes met hers. "Of course. You didn't even think. You just ran in there and threw yourself on top of me. That's the job. I'm not your job." The words came out sharper than she intended. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "No," he said. "You're not." They stared at each other. Everything that had been simmering between them since the selfie night, since before that, sat in the air. Undeniable now, impossible to shove back into the tidy box of employer-employee. On the monitors, the security teams moved like dark chess pieces across the property. Daniel reported that the shooter they'd dropped on the east lawn was being contained, that the runner had vanished into the dark, but that they had tire tracks and a direction. "It's a miracle you're both alive," Lucia murmured quietly, as she refilled their cups. Sophia flinched at the word. Miracle. It felt like too much, like jinxing it. "I brought her here to protect her," Anthony said. The statement was low, almost more to himself than to Lucia or Sophia. And the first real test of that protection, they get a shooter under her window. "You also got to her in time," Lucia pointed out. "You got to her before the third shot. You kept her from being dragged out of that bed while she was still asleep. That was you too." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "Not good enough." Sophia set her mug down carefully. "Anthony," he looked at her like he was bracing for a blow. "You can't make the shooters appear out of thin air and then blame yourself because they exist," she said. "You didn't invite them. You didn't put the gun in their hands. You got between them and me. I put you in this world," he countered. "I made you part of this by letting you stay. You made me part of this when you started having me in your house 3 days a week," she corrected softly. "When I became part of your routine." When they started taking pictures of me walking out of this door with that bag on my shoulder. The moment I stepped onto this property, I was in it. More than you wanted to admit. He said nothing, but his eyes told her she'd hit the mark. You offered me a way out, she continued. You said you could disappear me somewhere they'd never think to look. New name, new life. I did. And you'll still do that if I ask. Yes. His voice didn't waver. Even more so now. The room felt very small. Above them, the massive house, the grounds, the city pulsed along, unaware that everything had shifted for the people behind this steel door. I'm not deciding that tonight, she said finally. I can't. My brain is still stuck on the sound of my window being blown apart. That's fair, but I need you to hear something. She forced herself to look him straight in the eye. I knew there would be danger when I chose to stay. I didn't know it would be like this, but I knew it wouldn't be simple or safe. I stayed anyway. I don't get to pretend I was dragged into this kicking and screaming. You also didn't sign up for bullets in your bedroom, he said. There's a difference between accepting abstract risk and having it come through your window at 3 a.m. No argument there. Her lips twisted. But I also didn't sign up for you hovering outside my door because you couldn't sleep unless you knew I was okay. And I got that too. His eyes softened, the harsh lines of his face easing just a fraction. You make it sound like a good thing. You're bleeding because you cared enough to be standing in that hallway. She nodded at his bandaged arm. That's not nothing. He exhaled, something like relief or gratitude flickering over his features. You're handling this better than I expected. Give me time, she muttered. I might still break. If you do, he said quietly. I'll be right here while it happens. An odd calm settled over her at that. Not because the danger had passed. It hadn't. But because there was something solid next to her in this concrete box. Someone who had already proven what he would do when things went bad. Lucia busied herself at the kitchenette, pretending to give them privacy. Daniel's voice murmured updates into his radio. The monitors showed the ground slowly emptying of scrambling figures as teams finished their sweeps and returned to their posts. Eventually, the shaking in Sophia's hands dulled to a fine tremor instead of a violent quake. Her shoulders still throbbed, but bearably. Bone-deep exhaustion crept in, heavy and undeniable. You should try to sleep, Anthony said, noticing the way she struggled to keep her eyes open. In here. She glanced around the steel-walled room. You're serious. Nothing gets through these walls. He stood, grabbed extra blankets from a cabinet and shook them out. We stay down here until the house is completely cleared and the window is boarded up. No exceptions. What about you? I'll be right here. He nodded toward the monitors. I can watch the feeds from inside this room as easily as from my office. I mean sleep, she said. You're human, allegedly. You need it too. For tonight, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth. I'll settle for making sure you're asleep. He spread one blanket over the couch and handed her another. The couch wasn't huge, but it was wide enough for 2 people if they didn't mind proximity. Anthony, she said quietly, as he turned back to the monitors. I don't want to be alone. He stilled. Slowly, he looked at her over his shoulder. Not tonight, she added. Not after that. I know. I know you're trying to be careful, to do this the right way. But if you put me on this couch and sit in that chair across the room watching cameras, I'm going to lie here with my eyes open replaying every gunshot for the next 6 hours. He studied her face, reading everything she didn't have the words for. I don't need distance right now, she said. I need you, here, where I can feel you breathing and know that if something else happens, you'll move before I even hear it. He crossed back to the couch without another word. Shift, he said softly. She did. He lay down carefully behind her, the couch forcing them close, his chest pressed against her back, one arm sliding under her head as an extra pillow, the other settling over her waist in a loose, protective hold. The blankets cocooned them in shared warmth. Is this all right? He asked. She curled her fingers around his forearm, feeling the rough edges of the bandage beneath her palm. Yes. His breath stirred the hair at the nape of her neck. Nobody's getting through that door, he said. Nobody's getting to you while I'm here. I believe you. It was the simplest truth she had in this moment. The house, the shooters, the betrayals, the what comes next. All of it felt too big, too complex. But the weight of his arm over her, the steady rise and fall of his chest against her back, the memory of how fast he'd moved when the glass shattered, those were tangible. Her eyes drifted to the monitors one last time. Tiny figures moved on the screens, finishing their sweeps, securing the perimeter. The image of her blown-out window appeared on one feed, taped off, lights glaring harshly in the night. She closed her eyes. The echo of gunshots still ricocheted faintly in her skull, but each time the memory tried to sharpen, it bumped up against the reality of Anthony's heartbeat under her hand. Solid. Relentless. Present. She didn't know what she would decide in the morning, whether this was a life she could live with, whether love was enough to make this level of danger bearable. For now, in this steel box underground with a mafia boss wrapped around her like a shield, she let herself do the one thing her body had been fighting since the glass first broke. She slept. Sophia woke to the low murmur of male voices and the quiet hum of electronics. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The couch under her felt wrong, too narrow to be a bed, the air cooler than a bedroom should be. Then she registered the metal tang in the room, the faint glow of multiple screens, and the heavy weight draped over her waist. Anthony. They were still in the safe room. His arm held her snug against him, forearm banded across her middle, palm resting flat just under her ribs. His body was a solid line of warmth at her back, chest rising and falling slowly. At some point during the night, her hand had curled around his injured forearm, fingers resting just above the edge of the bandage. No additional movement on the east side, Daniel was saying quietly from somewhere near the monitors. Team's report clear. We've doubled the rotation on outside posts. No one in or out without visual ID and voice confirmation. Anthony's chest expanded against her as he took a deeper breath. And the shooter? Being handled off-site. Daniel hesitated. He's not top tier, a hired gun. But he knew enough to avoid cameras and hit that angle. That knowledge came from somewhere we didn't intend. Inside leak, Anthony said. Looks like it. Sophia kept her eyes closed, breathing slow and even. She wasn't ready yet to let go of the illusion of safety that came from pretending she was still asleep. The conversation washed over her in clipped phrases. Perimeter, blind spots, intel, containment. Words that belonged firmly to Anthony's world, not hers. The pattern fits with what we picked up before, Daniel went on. The O'Sullivan chatter about leveraging the translator. The timing matches too. This wasn't random. Sophia's fingers tightened unconsciously on Anthony's arm. His free hand came up, fingers brushing over the back of hers in a brief, reassuring stroke. He knew she was awake. He'd probably known the second she surfaced from sleep. Get me everything you pulled from the shooter, Anthony said. Names, contacts, payment. I want a direct line back to whoever signed off on last night. We'll have more in a few hours, Daniel replied. For now, we know enough. The order to grab her came from O'Sullivan's side. Whether Michael himself signed off or a hothead under him went rogue, that's still unclear. But it's them, the O'Sullivans again. Always circling at the edge of her understanding, faceless and amorphous until last night when their intentions had taken the shape of bullets. Give us a minute, Anthony said. Sophia heard Daniel's footsteps retreat, the soft click of the heavy door's inner mechanisms as it sealed behind him. Then it was just the two of them, and the quiet background hum of the room. You can stop pretending now, Anthony murmured near her ear. His tone was gentler than it had been when he'd been barking orders a few moments earlier. You've been awake for 10 minutes. She opened her eyes, caught by how easily he read her. You could tell? I can always tell. His thumb traced a slow line across the back of her hand. How do you feel? Like I got tackled by a truck, she said honestly. Everything aches. My shoulder hates you. Your shoulder can get in line, he said dryly. I've got a whole organization that hates me right now. She huffed out something that was almost a laugh, then pushed herself to sit up a bit. The movement pulled at muscles that had stiffened overnight. Anthony sat up with her, one hand hovering at her back, like he was ready to steady her if she so much as swayed. The security feeds showed gray morning light over the manicured lawns. Men still moved through some of the frames, but the chaotic rush of the night had settled into structured patrols. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "A little." He rolled his shoulder, wincing faintly. "You drooled on my arm at one point." "I did not. There is forensic evidence." "Liar." His mouth curved. "Okay, you didn't. But you snore when you're really out." "I absolutely do not." "You do a little thing with your nose," he said, eyes warming. "It's very you." Sophia looked away before he could see how that simple, oddly tender observation hit her. "So? The shooter was O'Sullivan's." "Shooter suggests a professional," Anthony said. "This guy was competent but not elite, which almost makes it worse. Someone with real skill would have cost them more. They thought this job was easy enough for a second-tier asset." "Grab the translator," Sophia said slowly. "Use her to control you. Something like that." "And now?" She swallowed. "What happens now?" Anthony didn't answer immediately. He rose, crossed to the small sink, and splashed water on his face one-handed, careful to keep his bandaged arm mostly out of the stream. When he came back, his hair was damp and his features more awake, but the same hard calculation sat in his eyes. "Now," he said, sitting beside her again. "We stop being purely reactive. Last night was reactive," she repeated. "They made a move. We survived it. We locked down. That's reacting. It keeps you alive in the moment, but it doesn't solve the problem." He laced his fingers together, forearms resting on his thighs. "The problem is this. The O'Sullivans think they can use you as leverage. They see you as a piece on the board they can grab and move at will. Until that changes, you're not safe. Not really. Not in Boston, not here, not anywhere." Sophia absorbed that. "So how do you change it?" "You change the calculation." His gaze flicked to the monitors, then back to her. "Right now, they think taking you is worth the risk. To fix that, we make the risk unacceptable. Politically, financially, personally. Without open war," she said, remembering his earlier warning. "You said that would be bad for business, and everything." "Exactly." His mouth thinned. "If I go scorched earth, bodies start dropping on both sides, cops get interested, federal agencies start sniffing around. It becomes chaos. Chaos is bad for everyone who depends on me, including you." She hated that this made sense. Hated that her survival now involved terms like politically unacceptable risk and collateral damage. "I have a question," she said. "Those men last night, if they'd gotten in, would they really have taken me alive?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Killing you outright wastes the leverage. Taking you gives them options." Sophia couldn't stop the shiver that worked through her. Anthony's hand immediately went to the small of her back, his thumb drawing slow, grounding circles. "Which brings us to the part of this you're not going to like," he said. "We have to adjust your status." "My status," in their eyes. "Right now, you're valuable, but defined vaguely. Rinaldi's translator who comes to the house 3 times a week. That made you a tempting target. They think you matter, but they don't know how much." His gaze locked on hers. "We change that. We make it clear to everyone watching that you're not a quiet, replaceable employee. You're under my protection in a way that has rules attached." She understood immediately. "You mean publicly?" "Yes. So not just this woman walks in and out of your house. More like this woman is with him." "Yes. That makes me more valuable to them," she said, heart thudding. "In some ways," he agreed. "But it also changes who can credibly touch you. There's a difference between going after a convenient asset and going after someone everyone recognizes as the center of a man's world. The first is opportunistic. The second is an act of war. Not everyone on the O'Sullivan side is eager to pull that trigger." Sophia thought of the phrase from the intercepted messages he'd shown her. "Leverage the translator. A clinical term for something ugly. Does this mean last night accelerates whatever you were planning with them?" she asked. "It forces the issue." Anthony leaned back, stretching his injured arm carefully. "We were already moving toward a sit-down. They've been pushing on the edges of my territory for months. This, he gestured upward toward where her destroyed bedroom sat in ruins, is them testing how far they can go. And your answer is, we meet. On neutral ground. Public enough that nobody can pull a stunt without witnesses. Controlled enough that security can do its job. We clarify lines. We lay out consequences. We, she echoed. Who is we? Me. He hesitated. And this is where you get veto power. Possibly you. Her head snapped around. You want me there? No, he said bluntly. I don't want you anywhere near them. I want you locked underground until this is over. He huffed out a breath. But that's emotion. Strategically, having you visible at that meeting changes the calculus. How? Right now, they're guessing how much you matter. If I show up at a negotiation with you beside me, under obvious guard, it sends a message. This is not a piece you get to move without inviting everything that comes with it. It also puts a face to the abstraction. Makes it harder, psychologically, to talk about you like an object when you're sitting 10 feet away, breathing. You're trying to guilt-trip a mafia rival, she said slowly. I'm trying to play on every human instinct available, he corrected. People behave differently when they have to look the person they're threatening in the eyes. Even men like Michael O'Sullivan. The name sat heavy between them. The rival she'd only known in theory was starting to take on shape. A man calculating enough to send shooters to her window, but also someone with his own rules and fears. And if I say no? She asked quietly. If I say I won't be paraded into some meeting so you can send a message, then we find another way. Anthony said immediately. This is your life. You get a say in how it's used. I won't drag you into a room you're not willing to enter. She appreciated that more than she could say. The last 24 hours had stripped control from her in a dozen ways. Having him explicitly hand a piece of it back mattered. Do you think it would work? She asked. Me being there. Yes. No hesitation. Because it forces them to acknowledge reality. You're not theoretical leverage. You're a person who now knows exactly how far they're willing to go. That knowledge cuts both ways. She stared at the monitors, at the slowly brightening grounds. You said something last night. That if you just hit back now, it's war. So this is you trying something between letting them get away with it and burning everything down. Exactly. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay. Anthony blinked. Okay, I'll go, she said. Her voice shook, but the words were steady. If that's what it takes to make them understand I'm not a pawn they get to move without consequences, I'll go. He searched her face. You're sure? No, she admitted. I'm not sure about anything right now. I'm scared out of my mind. But I also know I don't want to spend the rest of my life hiding in safe rooms waiting for someone else to decide I'm done being useful. If being in that room helps draw a line, then I'll be in the room. His hand closed around hers, strong and warm. You're braver than you think, or just too tired to come up with a better argument. She swallowed. What does that even look like? This meeting. We'll set it on territory neither side fully controls. Somewhere both of us have equal reason not to trash. Likely a restaurant that's already accustomed to hosting delicate conversations. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. There will be security on both sides. We agree to weapons rules beforehand. I'll have snipers in place. He'll have spotters. Everyone will know everyone is covered. That keeps egos in check. And me? You'll be escorted in with me, he said. Daniel driving, my men closest. You between us. You won't be alone for a second. You won't sit next to Michael. You won't speak to him directly unless you choose to. You're there as fact, not bait. Anthony. He tightened his grip once, sensing her rising panic. You'll be safe. As safe as anyone can be in a room like that. They can't touch you there without setting off something none of them actually want. You keep saying, they don't want war, Sophia said. But last night looked a lot like someone flirting with it. Someone under Michael. Anthony said. That's my read anyway. A hothead lieutenant trying to impress the boss by bringing him a shiny bargaining chip. Me. You. His mouth hardened. If Michael had personally ordered a full-scale move, it wouldn't have been 2 shooters on my lawn at 3 a.m. It would have been a coordinated hit on multiple fronts. This was pressure. A test. Now I push back and see whether he reins his people in or doubles down. She realized, with a sudden startling clarity, that this was what leadership looked like in his world. Not just violence, chess. Reading pressure points. Knowing when to press and when to pull back. Knowing when to walk into a room full of enemies and trust that the rules holding everyone in place would actually work. "If we go," she said slowly, "you have to promise me something." "Name it." No cowboy moves, no dramatic lunges. No deciding in the moment that you're going to take him out because you're sick of this dance. I'm agreeing to walk into that room on the assumption that we're there to talk, not to start the war you said would destroy everything. His lip curled faintly. "You really think I'm that reckless? I think you love me enough to do something stupid if he so much as looks at me wrong," she said, the words slipping out before she could catch it. Silence fell between them. She felt heat climb her neck. She hadn't planned to say that now, raw and unarmored in the bright light of the safe room. Anthony's grip on her hand tightened again, just a fraction. "You're right," he said quietly. "I do, and I won't. No cowboy moves. No first shots from our side. We go in with the intent to leave with fewer enemies than we walked in with. And if he doesn't play by those rules, then," Anthony said, eyes going colder than she'd ever seen them, "we adapt. But I won't drag you into that room as cover for something I intend to do anyway. That's not who I am." She searched his face. Believed him. The inner door clicked again. Daniel stepped in, tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "We've got more from the shooter, and I've put feelers out toward O'Sullivan. He's already heard about last night. Word is he's not pleased." "Not pleased it failed?" Sophia asked before she could stop herself. "Not pleased it happened," Daniel answered, surprising her. "A stunt like that without his clear approval makes him look like he can't control his own house. That's bad for a man like him. Bad for business." Anthony's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "So he has a mess to clean up, same as I do." "Exactly," Daniel said. "He's more likely to sit down now, if only to make sure no one else under him gets creative." "Good." Anthony rose, all business again. "Reach out. Tell him I want to meet. Today. Neutral ground." Daniel nodded. "And Miss Grant?" "She comes," Anthony said. Daniel's eyes flicked to Sophia, gauging her reaction. "You're sure?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'm coming anyway." A brief glint of respect crossed Daniel's face. "Understood. I'll pick a place with good sightlines and bad cell service." When Daniel left again, Anthony turned back to her. "We have a few hours before anything happens. Try to rest if you can. Eat. Shower. We'll move you to an interior room to change. No windows." "No more windows for me," she said weakly. "Not for a while," he agreed. "Interior walls only." She let him help her stand. Her legs felt unsteady, but they held, as they stepped out of the safe room into his office. The house felt different. Less like a fortress, more like a held breath. Upstairs, somewhere behind plaster and paint, her old room sat in ruins, bullet holes in the walls and shattered glass ground into the rug. Ahead of her, a future that now included walking into a private negotiation with a man whose people had tried to steal her from her bed. Between those two realities walked Anthony, one step ahead, his bandaged arm hanging at his side, his shoulders squared. Sophia followed, heart pounding, fully aware that there was no such thing as being half in this life anymore. He didn't kiss her in the car. The entire ride back from the restaurant, Sophia felt the words he'd said replaying in her chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. In the private room with Michael O'Sullivan, under too bright lights and too many eyes, Anthony had said it like an undeniable fact, that he loved her, that she wasn't leverage, that touching her would be treated as an act of war. He had looked at her as he said it, not at his rival, like he needed her to hear it just as clearly as Michael did. But in the SUV inching through late-night Manhattan traffic, he kept his hands to himself. Daniel drove, focused on the road. 2 other security cars flanked them, one in front, one behind. The city outside the tinted windows pulsed with its usual energy. Neon signs, late-night diners, people weaving between cabs. Inside the vehicle, it was quiet, insulated. Anthony sat beside her in the back seat, shoulders relaxed, but eyes alert. Every now and then, his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, checking the cars behind them, the sidewalks, the intersections. His jaw was set in that familiar line that meant his mind was still working, still turning over angles and outcomes. Sophia stared at her hands in her lap, at the way her fingers twisted together. She could still feel the faint impression of the restaurant chair under her palms, the weight of the room's attention when she'd walked in with him. She could hear Michael's accented voice, cold and assessing, as he'd apologized for a foolish subordinate over a glass of expensive whiskey. They had survived it. No one had raised a weapon. No one had made a sudden move. The truce had held. Now came the part that scared her in a different way. At a red light, Anthony finally looked directly at her. "You okay?" It was a simple question, and she could have answered it with a lie, and they both would have recognized it. Instead, she said, "Ask me again in the morning." He inclined his head. "Fair." She studied his profile for a moment. The set of his mouth was thoughtful rather than tense now. The fury he'd carried into the meeting had cooled into something quieter, resolved rather than explosive. "You meant it," she said softly. "What you said in there." His gaze came back to her, focused and unguarded. "Yes." "You told him you love me." The word still felt fragile in her mouth, like something that could shatter if handled too carelessly. "You told your rival that the woman he tried to use against you is the person you're in love with." "Yes," he said again, like there was no other possible answer. "And you said it for him to hear it," she went on, forcing herself not to look away. "But you also said it for me, didn't you? For both of you," he admitted. Michael needed to understand what he was dealing with. "And you—" His fingers flexed once on his thigh. "You deserve to hear it somewhere other than in the middle of a crisis bunker or shouted over gunfire." She let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. "You're not very good at timing." "I'm learning," he said dryly. The light changed. The SUV moved forward. Sophia watched their reflections slide along the dark glass of a storefront. A man and a woman sitting with too much space between them, both pretending to be calm. "When we get home," Anthony said after a moment, "we're going to have one conversation, before we talk about anything else. Before I get dragged into calls and debriefs and security briefings." "One conversation," she repeated. "About what?" "About everything," he said. "About what you want. About whether you're still in this. About what this even is." His mouth twisted. "That deserves to happen without Michael O'Sullivan watching me like a hawk from across a table." Her heart did a strange, complicated thing. Okay. The mansion was quieter than she'd ever seen it when they pulled through the gates. Security was visible now in a way it hadn't been before. Men at the perimeter, more cameras, subtle changes in how vehicles were checked as they entered. It felt less like a home and more like a command center that happened to have marble floors. Daniel pulled up under the covered entrance and put the SUV in park. "We're clear," he said, glancing back. "No tails." "Good," Anthony answered. "Get some sleep. We'll debrief in the morning." Daniel's gaze flicked to Sophia. A brief, respectful nod. "You did well in there," he said. "Most people without training wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes at that table." "Thank you," she said, meaning it. Inside, the house swallowed them with warmth and soft lighting. It smelled like whatever Lucia had been cooking earlier, faint traces of garlic and tomato and something sweet. For a moment, as they walked down the hallway toward his office, Sophia could almost pretend they'd just come back from a normal dinner date. It was the almost that hurt. Anthony opened the door to his office and gestured for her to go in first. When the door clicked shut behind them, the rest of the house seemed to fall away. The room was lit by the lamp on his desk, casting everything in amber. He didn't go behind the desk, didn't sit in his usual chair. Instead, he stopped in the middle of the room and turned to face her fully. "Sophia," he said quietly. There was something in his voice that made her straighten instinctively. This is the part where you tell me you changed your mind, she asked, intending to make a joke of it and failing. The words came out too thin. No, he said. This is the part where I make sure you know exactly what my mind is. He closed the distance between them until he was standing just in front of her. Not too close. Not quite touching. The restraint made her want to grab his shirt and erase the space. You asked me, the night of the selfie, if this was jealousy, he said. If I was reacting to the idea of someone else seeing you instead of actually wanting you. I remember, she said. At the time, I didn't answer that very well. I fell back on protection and security and all the ways I thought I was keeping you safe. His eyes stayed on her face, steady and unflinching. That wasn't the whole truth. The truth is simple. I love you. I'm in love with you. I have been for a long time. She swallowed hard. Since when? The 3rd week you worked for me, he said without hesitation. You corrected a translation that would have cost me a lot of money and a lot of face. You were nervous about telling me I was wrong, but you did it anyway because getting it right mattered more to you than whether I liked it. His mouth softened slightly at the memory. I went home that night more rattled than I'd been in years. I told myself it was because I'd almost signed a bad contract. It took weeks before I admitted to myself that it was because of you. Her throat tightened. And you decided, what? That you weren't allowed to want me? That I wasn't allowed to act on it, he corrected. Wanting you was unavoidable. Acting on it meant pulling you into this world in a way you hadn't consented to. It meant making you a target instead of someone the O'Sullivans only suspected might matter. And now I am one anyway, she said softly. A target. Because they escalated. His jaw hardened. Because they broke rules that were supposed to hold tacitly between us. They came into my home and tried to take you out of your bed. That changed things. In what way? In the way that any illusion I had about protecting you by keeping you at arm's length is gone. He exhaled slowly. You're in it, Sophia, through no fault of your own. That wasn't your choice. What is your choice now? Is whether you want to be in it with me. She let that sink in. He wasn't pretending anymore. Not hiding behind professionalism or security concerns. He was putting the question in the middle of the room and waiting for her to pick it up. That's what tonight was about for you, she realized. Not just sending a message to Michael. Proving to me, and to yourself, that you're not going to hide me in the shadows while you pretend I'm expendable. Yes, his voice softened. I wanted him to see that if he touched you, he'd be touching me, not just my operations. Me. And I wanted you to hear, without sirens or gunshots or adrenaline, that I'm done lying to myself about how I feel. Silence stretched between them. Sophia's heart hammered, but there was a strange calm underneath it, like her mind had finally caught up to where her body had been for weeks. You asked me in the safe room if I wanted out, she said. If this was too much. If I needed to walk away. That was the one thing you never asked me in your office in the beginning, when you kept me at a distance. You made that decision for me back then. I did, he said. I convinced myself I was doing it for your good. That choosing for you was the only way to keep you safe. I was wrong. And now, she pressed, if I said right now that I can't do this, that it's too dangerous, that I want to go to Boston and pretend I never met you, would you let me? His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them again, they were raw. Yes, he said. I'd hate it. I'd fight it internally every second. But I'd let you go. I'd move heaven and earth to make sure you were protected wherever you went. I'd reroute resources, put people on you who never show their faces. You'd never see me again. But you'd be safe. The ache in her chest sharpened. He meant it. That was the worst part. He would let her walk away if she asked, would break his own heart, and build her a fortress somewhere else, because he'd decided that was what loving her required. It would be easier to leave, she realized. Simpler, cleaner, no meetings with dangerous men, no safe rooms, no waking up to gunfire, just a new city, a normal job, a life where her biggest concern was whether the subway made her late. You talked about being selfish, she said slowly, about bringing me into this house because you couldn't stand the idea of me leaving. You know what's selfish on my side? What? Wanting you anyway, she whispered. Knowing what this life looks like now, knowing what last night felt like, and still wanting a future that has you in it. That's not rational. It's not sensible, but it's real. He took half a step closer. Sophia, you asked me earlier if I was still in this, she said. If I still felt the same after hearing bullets come through my window. I'm still here. I went into that meeting with you. I watched you sit across from a man who would have happily used me against you, and I didn't run. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, he said quietly. She drew in a shaky breath. I love you too. The words landed between them like a physical thing. Anthony looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. For a second, he didn't move. Then very slowly, his composure cracked. Not in any dramatic way. No tears, no collapse. Just a subtle softening of his entire face. A naked relief that made him look younger, less carved from stone. Say it again, he asked. His voice was rough. Please, I love you. The fear didn't go away when she said it. Neither did the awareness of what that meant, of what it would cost. But the truth was solid under all of that. I have for a long time. I tried to stop. I tried to move on. I tried to take a job in another state to make this easier on both of us. None of it worked. He closed the last bit of distance between them and lifted his hands to her face. Fingers framing her jaw, thumbs brushing along her cheekbones. You understand what you're choosing, he said. The danger. The instability. The nights like last night. I understand enough to know it's not going to be easy, she said. And I also understand that every time I imagined leaving, it hurt more than the idea of staying and being afraid. He kissed her then. It was nothing like the stolen moments in the kitchen or the desperate collision of mouths in the safe room when they'd thought the world might end. This kiss was deliberate, slow, his lips on hers, firm and reverent, like he was sealing something rather than testing it. Sophia rose onto her toes, hands fisting in the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. His fingers slid into her hair, deepening the kiss in gradual increments, giving her room to breathe or pull back or change her mind. She didn't. When they finally broke apart, breathing slightly faster, his forehead rested against hers. His hands stayed in her hair, thumb stroking the sensitive skin just behind her ear. I need to make you another promise, he said quietly. Two, actually. Okay, she whispered. First, he said, I will never lie to you about danger to make you more comfortable. I won't tell you you're safe when you're not. I won't minimize threats because I'm afraid you'll leave if you see them clearly. If something is coming, you'll know. She nodded, swallowing hard. And the second? The second is that loving you doesn't erase what I am. His voice stayed gentle, but the words were iron. I won't pretend this life is something it isn't. I won't tell you fairy tales about getting out clean in a year or two. I have legitimate businesses now, yes, but the parts of my world that draw men like O'Sullivan don't disappear because I want them to. If you stay, if we build something together, it's inside this reality, not some fantasy version of it. Sophia met his gaze. Then I need to make you a promise too. He waited. I won't punish you for what you can't change, she said. I won't pretend I didn't know what I was signing up for and then hold it over your head every time something scares me. She drew in a breath. But I also won't stop calling you out if you hide behind that's how it is to avoid doing better where you can. His mouth curved slowly. You're going to be trouble. You knew that when you fell for me fixing your translations. She shot back. True, he conceded. He kissed her again, softer this time. And when they parted, he didn't move far. His hand slid down to rest lightly at her waist, fingers splayed. So what does this, us, actually look like now? She asked. Day to day. Messy, he said honestly. There will be days when it feels normal. Breakfast in the kitchen, you working on translations, me yelling at contractors. There will be days when the phone rings and I have to leave in the middle of dinner. Nights when security wakes us up because someone did something stupid 3 boroughs over and it ripples back here. And me? You, he said, will not be a ghost in this house anymore. Everyone already knows you're here. After tonight, they know exactly what you are to me. You'll still work if you want to. Translate, write, whatever path you carve out. You'll have security shadowing you in ways that will annoy you and sometimes scare you. You'll have a say in decisions that affect your safety. You'll see parts of this world most people only read about. You make it sound like a job description, she said wryly. In a way, it is, he admitted. Not a job. A role. The person at my side in this life isn't ornamental. It's not just about feelings. It's about trust, about judgment, about being willing to tell me when I'm being an idiot. You are an idiot sometimes, she said. I know. His gaze softened again. That's one of the reasons I need you. The weight of what he was offering settled over her. Not a fairy tale. Not a rescue. A partnership built in a dangerous world, grounded in hard truths and complicated logistics. Her mind flickered briefly to Ryan in Ohio, to the promise of Boston, to the version of herself who might have taken that job and never woken to gunshots or sat across from an Irish mobster in a restaurant. That version lived in a universe parallel to this one, forever out of reach now. This doesn't mean I won't get scared, she said. I expect you to get scared, he answered. If you weren't, I'd be worried. And it doesn't mean you get to make unilateral decisions for my own good anymore, she added. If you're going to change our lives in a major way, I get a vote. He nodded. You have my word. On everything? She pressed. On everything that touches you, he said. I can't promise you a seat at every business discussion. Some things are ugly in ways you don't need in your head. But if it affects your safety, your freedom, your life, you're in that conversation. No exceptions. She believed him. Not because she thought he was incapable of messing up, but because he was being deliberate now. Conscious. Choosing openness where he'd once chosen distance. Okay, she said again, the word heavier now. Then I'm in. With you. In all of it. Something like awe flickered through his eyes. He pulled her into his chest, arms wrapping around her in a tight embrace, as if some part of him still didn't believe she was really there, really choosing this. She pressed her face against his shoulder, inhaled the familiar mix of soap and cologne, and something uniquely him. They stood like that for a long time, the outside world pressing against the windows, while inside the office the axis of her life shifted and settled. Later, when she finally went to the interior room they'd set up for her, a room with no exterior windows, with reinforced walls, with a bed that hadn't been shredded by gunfire. She lay awake for a while, listening to the quiet. Her mind replayed the last week. Selfies and fights and confessions and bullets. The weight of his body over hers. The cold air rushing through broken glass. The way he'd said, I love you, like it was both an admission and a vow. When she finally drifted off, she did it with the knowledge that fear would be a regular visitor in this new life. But so would he, and for now, that was enough to steady her. Down the hall, in his own room, Anthony stared at the ceiling in the dark, feeling both more exposed and more anchored than he ever had. For the first time in years, he wasn't planning alone. The decisions ahead were heavier, because they touched more than just him. He turned onto his side, reached for his phone, and opened his messages. A photo stared back at him, a mirror selfie in a burgundy dress, posted days ago by a woman who'd thought she was invisible. He didn't ask her to delete it. He set the phone down, closed his eyes, and let himself imagine, just for a moment, that all the things they'd promised each other in his office were possible. In the fragile quiet between one crisis and the next, that belief was the only thing that made the rest of it make sense. 6 months later, the house didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a place that had learned how to breathe again. The changes were subtle if you didn't know where to look. Extra cameras tucked into eaves. New guards at the gate, more rotation on the night shifts, a different brand of SUV in the garage with reinforced panels you couldn't see unless you knew what you were seeing. But the rhythms of the mansion had settled into something that felt almost normal. Sophia stood at the kitchen counter, laptop open, morning light pouring through the interior courtyard windows. She'd claimed this spot as her workspace most days, ignoring the more formal office Anthony had offered her. The kitchen felt alive, staff coming and going, Lucia humming under her breath as she prepped meals, the occasional guard slipping in for coffee. It grounded her in a way 4 walls and a big desk never would. On the screen, A PDF contract blinked back at her. At the top, in clean serif font, was the name of a small New York publishing house. Below that, her own name, Sophia Grant, followed by the words, Translator of Record. She read the final clause again, even though she'd memorized it 2 days ago. Exclusive world English rights, modest advance, royalty percentage, nothing extraordinary in the grand scheme of publishing. But to her it felt enormous. "You're frowning at good news," Anthony said from behind her. She hadn't heard him come in, but she knew that voice anywhere. She turned to find him leaning in the doorway, white dress shirt rolled to his forearms, dark slacks. No tie yet. Morning suited him. They softened the edges of the man who spent his nights putting out fires. "I'm not frowning," she said. "I'm processing." He pushed off the doorframe and crossed the room, coming to stand beside her. The faint smell of his cologne and coffee wrapped around her, familiar and comforting. "Processing the part where your name is going to be on the cover of a book?" he asked. She shrugged, unable to hide the small smile tugging at her mouth. "Maybe." Anthony bent, resting one hand on the counter, the other on the back of her chair, effectively caging her in. He glanced at the screen, then at her. "Sign it," he said. "You earned this." "You read the whole thing?" she asked. "Twice." His mouth curved. "Very boring. No hidden clauses about selling your soul to the Irish or stipulations that you must cease all association with dangerous men. Tragic," she murmured. "Those are my favorite clauses." He kissed the top of her head, the gesture easy now in a way it hadn't been months ago. Affection no longer felt like something snatched in stolen moments. It was woven through their days. Touches at breakfast, quick kisses in hallways, fingers brushing in passing. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but in a good way. The kind of nervous that means something matters. Then that's the right kind." He straightened. "You should tell her today. She'll want to know." "Her who?" Sophia asked, even though she already knew. "My sister," he said. "Valentina. She flies in today. It would be a shame if you waited until she was here 5 minutes before dropping by, the way I'm getting published." "Right." Sophia's stomach fluttered with a very different kind of nervousness. "No pressure or anything? Just meeting your sister who thinks you're a semi-respectable businessman and not—" She gestured vaguely. "You." I told her the truth, he said. My version of it. Enough that she understands the world she's coming home to. She's not fragile, Piccola. Little one. She's stubborn. You'll like her. "She's your sister," Sophia said. "I'm terrified." "You faced down Michael O'Sullivan across a table," Anthony reminded her. "Valentina is easier. She doesn't carry a gun. She just carries very strong opinions and a stethoscope. That's not comforting." He reached past her and tapped the screen. "Sign the contract. Then we'll worry about my sister judging me." She took a breath, clicked where indicated, and watched her name rendered digitally at the bottom of the document. It felt anticlimactic for something that changed so much and yet so little at the same time. "There," she said. "Done." Anthony's hand came to rest on the back of her neck, thumb skating gently over the base of her skull. "I'm proud of you." She tilted her head back to look at him. "You helped. I didn't translate those chapters," he said. "I didn't stay up until 2 a.m. arguing with 19th century Italian syntax." "No," she conceded. "But you did read every version and pretend you weren't enjoying it." "I didn't pretend," he said. "I was enjoying it." "Your voice comes through even when it's someone else's words." Warmth spread through her chest at that. There had been a time when she doubted she had a voice at all. Now, between his world and her work, she was starting to believe she had several. The house phone on the wall buzzed. Lucia answered, listened, then turned toward them. "Gate says your 9 o'clock is early," she said to Anthony. "He's at the front." "Of course he is," Anthony muttered. He kissed Sophia once more, quick and soft. "Duty calls. Save me a copy of that contract. I'm framing it." She rolled her eyes. "That's weird. I'm a weird man." He winked at her and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Several hours later, the weirdness of their life reasserted itself in a very different way. Sophia was in the library when the alarm on her phone buzzed, a benign, everyday chime she'd set herself, not the piercing tone of the security system. It read, "Anthony's car check." She frowned, momentarily confused, then remembered. 2 weeks ago, after a particularly unsettling briefing about improvised explosives being used in Europe, Daniel had suggested randomizing vehicle checks before Anthony left the compound. Not because there'd been a specific threat, but because it's what smart people do when dumb people get creative. The randomness was key. Different days, different times, different cars. Today apparently had come up. Sophia closed her book, Italian poetry this time, for fun rather than work, and headed toward the garage level. She passed 2 guards who nodded respectfully, their presence so common now it barely registered. 6 months ago, knowing there were armed men in every hallway would have set her on edge. Now, it was just Tuesday. The garage was cool, and smelled faintly of motor oil and new tires. Anthony stood near the black sedan he used for most of his city appointments. Jacket off, sleeves rolled. He and Daniel were in tight conversation, their posture taut. "What's going on?" Sophia asked, slowing her steps. Both men looked up at her. Daniel's expression was a controlled blank. Anthony's was not. There was a line between his brows she recognized, one that only appeared when something had tripped his internal alarms. "Stay there," he said. She stopped immediately. Old habits from the shooting night hadn't gone anywhere. Daniel gestured toward the car. Routine inspection picked up something odd under the chassis. Weight differential, magnetic signature. "We called in the techs. They found this." He pointed to a small metallic device resting on a cart a good 20 feet from the nearest vehicle. It was about the size of a paperback book, matte black, with a mess of wires and a blinking red light that made Sophia's skin crawl. "Is that?" "Yes," Anthony said, or at least it was. "Inert now. They've disabled the trigger, but it's a bomb." She felt oddly calm. The panic she might have expected didn't crash over her the way it had with the gunfire. Maybe because this time it hadn't gone off, because they were standing here intact, having discovered it rather than survived it. "Do we know who?" she asked. "Not yet," Daniel said, "but we will. There aren't many groups with both the nerve and the know-how to plant that under your car on this property." "The O'Sullivans?" Sophia asked. "Unlikely," Anthony said. "We have an agreement. This is the kind of sloppiness Michael can't afford. If he wanted to break the truce, it wouldn't be like this." Sophia thought of the names she'd learned over the past months, the organizations that floated at the edges of their world. Russians, Albanians, cartels, people whose operations intersected with Anthony's in complicated webs of territory and money. "So someone else wants your attention," she said. "They didn't get the memo that you're busy keeping an Irish truce." "Everyone wants attention," Anthony muttered. "Some just ask for it with bombs instead of meetings." "Boss," Daniel cut in, "they're sweeping the rest of the fleet. We'll have an answer on whether this was a one-off or a more enthusiastic installation soon. For now, we're locking down vehicle movement." "Do it," Anthony said. He looked back at Sophia. "You're not leaving the property until I say otherwise." She lifted an eyebrow. "Because of that?" "Yes. What if I promised to wear a helmet?" His mouth twitched unwillingly. "Not funny. Little bit funny." He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Sophia." She sobered. "Okay. I won't argue. I like not exploding. It's become a new hobby." Daniel made a choked sound that might have been a laugh. "I'll let you know when we have something concrete," he said, then moved away, already barking orders into his radio. Anthony took her hand, fingers sliding between hers. They walked back up to the main floor together, leaving the cool garage and its ugly discovery behind. "You're not freaked out," he observed as they reached the hallway. "I am," she said, "but it's a different flavor than last time. Less blindsided." "You're getting used to this," he said quietly. "I'm getting better at existing with it," she corrected. "There's a difference. I don't think you ever really get used to people trying to blow you up." "No," he agreed. "You don't." They ended up in the small sitting room off the library. one of the cozier spaces in the house, with deep chairs and shelves of books that looked actually read rather than curated. Sophia curled into an armchair. Anthony sat in the one opposite, elbows on his knees, hands steepled. "So," she said after a minute. "Car bomb. So," he echoed. "Does this change anything? Big picture?" "It accelerates some things," he said, "clarifies others. Someone out there isn't happy with the stability we've been building. They think they can scare me back into old patterns. Or test me the way Michael's man tested me with you. How do you respond?" she asked. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have dared phrase it like that. Now, it was how they talked. Not, "What are you going to do?" but "What do we do?" "Carefully," he said. "We trace where it came from. We follow money, components, skilled hands. We make it clear that trying to blow me up in my own driveway has a price. But we don't blow up a city block in retaliation. We don't become the thing they're trying to paint us as." She nodded. "Controlled anger, not wild." "Exactly." He watched her for a moment, something like admiration in his eyes. "You really are in this now," he said. "Not just living in the same house. You understand how the lines are drawn." "I understand it matters who draws them," she said. "And how?" He smiled then, small and genuine. "Remind me to never underestimate you again." "You say that like you won't," she teased. Point taken. They sat in companionable silence until a soft knock sounded at the doorframe. Lucia appeared, balancing a tray with coffee and a plate of biscotti. Behind her, another figure hovered. Shorter, slimmer, dark hair pulled into a high ponytail, a rolling suitcase handle in one hand. "Someone's here to see you," Lucia said. Her eyes were warm, amused. "Or possibly him. Jury's still out." Anthony stood so fast his chair scraped the rug. "Valentina." His sister grinned, the expression bright and immediate. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a navy hoodie with the logo of a Viennese university hospital. A stethoscope dangled casually around her neck like jewelry. "Big brother," she said, dropping the suitcase handle and opening her arms. He crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. Sophia watched something in him unwind in that moment, some tight coil loosening that even she hadn't fully seen before. When he set her down, Valentina looked past him, eyes landing on Sophia. They were the same deep brown as Anthony's, but where his often held storm clouds, hers sparkled with quick intelligence and mischief. "And you must be the famous translator," she said, stepping forward without hesitation. "The one who fixed his life and his Italian." Sophia got to her feet, suddenly aware of the coffee stain on the hem of her t-shirt, and the way her hair was doing its own thing. "I'm Sophia. It's really nice to meet you." Valentina's smile turned softer. "He's different when he talks about you," she said bluntly. "In a good way. Less concrete, more human. Please stop talking," Anthony muttered. "Never," she retorted, then reached out and pulled Sophia into a hug, so quick and sure, it knocked the awkwardness right out of her. "Thank you for not running away from him," Valentina whispered near her ear. "Somebody had to stay." Sophia laughed, surprised and a little choked. "I tried," she admitted, "multiple times." "I know," Valentina said, pulling back. "He called me in the middle of the night when you accepted that job in Boston. I told him he was an idiot." "You did," Anthony said. Repeatedly, Valentina stepped back and took them both in with a doctor's assessing eye. "You look good," she pronounced. "Both of you. Slightly haunted, but good." "Car talk can wait," Anthony cut in lightly. "You just got off a 9-hour flight. Sit. Lucia will feed you until you forget airplane food is a thing." Lucia, already setting down the tray, snorted. "I'm not a magician, but I can try." They settled into the chairs, Valentina perched sideways in hers, feet tucked up, radiating a kind of restless energy that filled the room. Conversation flowed easily. Stories from Vienna, hospital rotations, colorful patients. She peppered Anthony with questions about the legitimate parts of his business and shot him pointed looks when he tried to gloss over other details. At one point, she turned to Sophia. "And you? Besides saving my brother from signing contracts written by idiots and getting published, what do you do all day in this marble palace? Apparently, I also act as a human barometer for whether he's about to do something reckless, Sophia said. And I complain about security following me into grocery stores. Ungrateful, Anthony muttered. We keep you alive. You call it complaining. Valentina's gaze sharpened. How bad has it been? She asked softly, looking between them now. Really? The question hung heavier than the room's earlier levity. Anthony opened his mouth, but Sophia spoke first. Bad enough that I don't sleep through every night, she said. But not so bad that I regret staying. Valentina studied her. Then she looked at her brother. And you? Any regrets? Only about the time I wasted, he said, before I stopped pretending I didn't want this. Valentina's eyes softened. Okay then, she said. I can work with that. Later, after Lucia had fed all of them to the point of near collapse, and Valentina had been shown to the guest suite carefully positioned in the safest interior section of the house, Sophia and Anthony found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace. The city spread out below them, a sea of lights and concrete and possibility. Sophia leaned against the railing, the evening breeze playing with the ends of her hair. Anthony stood beside her, their shoulders touching. How does it feel? He asked quietly. Being the woman who has both a publishing contract and a doctor in the family who now knows exactly how reckless her brother is? Overwhelming, she said, in a strangely good way. He fell silent, watching the skyline. For a while they didn't speak. The hum of traffic far below, the occasional distant siren, the murmur of the city going about its life, they all blended into a kind of white noise. You know, he said at last, 6 months ago, if someone had told me we'd have peace with O'Sullivan, averted a bombing, brought my sister home, and you'd have a book deal, I'd have assumed they were selling something. Like hope? She asked. Like delusion, he said. Hope wasn't really in my vocabulary back then. And now? He turned his head to look at her. Now I have you correcting my grammar and telling me I'm being dramatic when I deserve it. You often deserve it, she said. He smiled, then sobered. We're not done. There will be more nights like the ones we've had. Different enemies? New angles? This isn't a happily ever after. It's a work in progress. You mean life, she said. Yes. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. You still okay with that? She looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, other lives were unfolding. Simpler, maybe, or just complicated in different ways. She thought of her younger self, sitting in a cramped apartment with a translation gig and a crush on her boss, convinced she was invisible. She thought of the woman who'd posted a mirror selfie as both a test and a farewell. I'm not sure okay is the right word, she said slowly. But I'm here, on purpose, with you. That feels like the only thing I'm certain about. That's more than I ever expected, he said quietly. Down below, in the glow of the mansion's windows, Lucia moved through the kitchen, probably prepping breakfast for the next morning. Somewhere on the property, Daniel checked a perimeter camera, scanning for patterns no one else saw. In a guest room, Valentina texted friends in Vienna that she'd arrived, and her brother was less of a robot than advertised. Earlier, she'd finally made the call she'd been avoiding. Ashley answered on the first ring, a rush of relief and fury tangled together in her voice. Sophia kept it simple, safe, promised she was all right, and promised again that she hadn't vanished on purpose. When Ashley's anger broke into shaky laughter, Sophia found herself laughing too, damp-eyed and grateful. They set a date for coffee in a crowded cafe, soon, somewhere public, somewhere normal, somewhere Daniel could watch without being seen. Anthony had agreed without hesitation, because protecting Sophia didn't have to mean erasing everything that had once been hers. Life kept moving. Threats would come and go. Deals would be made and broken. Somewhere out there, someone was probably already sketching out the next stupid idea involving Anthony Rinaldi's name. But up here, on this terrace with the city laid out before them, Sophia let herself lean into him, resting her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her automatically, fitting like it had always been meant to be there. I spent years trying not to be seen, she said softly, thinking invisibility was safer, that if no one really looked at me, nothing bad could happen. And now? He asked. Now I know that being invisible isn't the same thing as being safe, she said. It's just empty. This is terrifying. But it's also real. He kissed her temple. You're not invisible anymore. No, she agreed. And for the first time, I don't want to be. They stood there until the air grew colder, and the city lights blurred at the edges of her vision from fatigue. Eventually, they went back inside, closing the terrace door gently behind them. The world outside would always be dangerous, unpredictable, messy. Their life together would never be neat. But as Sophia walked down the hallway, passing the room where her first bullet-scarred suite had once been, and the safe room that had become both prison and refuge, she realized something simple and startling. She wasn't surviving his world anymore. She was living in it.